Okay, guys, this is the lecture on mutual aid. Not explaining what mutual aid is. I found a video that does a pretty good job of that, and so that's what I've assigned for you guys to understand what mutual aid is. But this is more to understand what's going on in the mutual aid dossier, which is your reading and social annotation for this week. So first, let me just say a little bit about what is intended by this unit. I want you guys to come in contact with real-life applications of philosophy, political philosophy, ethics, and so forth, especially leading into the creation of your first maker project. And so that's what this week is for, to see, oh, this is what people are doing with their political philosophy. This is the application of the ideas that come from Pankhurst and King and some of Socrates, right? So that is why we're doing this unit. It's not because I'm trying to push you to take certain actions or do certain things or have certain political beliefs. Rather, it's to see that these sorts of concepts, what we've been talking about, the skills that we've been trying to develop over the course of the semester so far, have implications and application in the real world. And then also to give you some inspiration for your maker project. A lot of the resources that are linked in the dossier, especially to like mutual aid or the anarchist library, or going to be the sorts of things that you may be able to create as part of your maker project, which is why your proposal is due at the end of this week. So that's not too big of a deal. So what's going on in this dossier? So let's start with a simple fact about living in the United States that bears repeating. You are innocent until proven guilty. So simply being arrested, being detained, being in jail with no conviction, no plea deal or anything like that, or plea at all, you're innocent. Like, you've not been found guilty of the crime. And this bears repeating because a lot of people think that you wouldn't be arrested if you weren't guilty, but that's simply not the case. In fact, a lot of people around the time that the Bill of Rights were being written and added to the Constitution, they didn't just include something like innocent until proven guilty in the Constitution because of whimsy. They did it because people were being arrested and accused of crimes they didn't commit, for various reasons. One of those reasons was political activity, activism, and so forth. And so you're innocent until proven guilty in the United States. However, the United States has this weird sort of practice that other countries don't have. So if you're an international student, this may be unfamiliar to you, but if you're arrested in the United States, you go to something called an arraignment, where you enter a plea, not guilty, and then the judge has to assess whether or not you're a flight risk or a threat to the community. And if you're a threat to a community, you usually get bail denied outright. Some of this is by statute. So like in a lot of states, if you're on probation and you're arrested for violating your probation, whether or not you were found guilty at the time of your arraignment, because of course you haven't been, you're merely being arraigned, by statute, you are denied bail because of the crime you're charged with. So oftentimes what happens is that a judge assesses an amount, a bail, a bond amount. And this is ostensibly to ensure that the accused comes back for their trial, for their hearings. And in the United States, this has resulted in tens of thousands of people being in county jails who have not been convicted of a crime. Because if you say, well, for 10% of $10,000, which would be $1,000, you can be free while you have yet to be convicted of the crime we've accused you of. Poor people don't got money. So of course, there are various reasons why a bondsman would refuse to bail somebody out. Often it's because, well, it can't be paid back, but occasionally it's because of the reasons that people have been, like the particular crime that people have been accused of. And if you can't get a bondsman to bail somebody out to front that money, the family and friends have to do it, and oftentimes poor people are friends and family with other poor people, and so there's just no money. So people end up sitting in jail because they can't be bailed out. Of course, if you are politically active, you're going to come in contact with the police, maybe, if you're protesting, if you're demonstrating. And the police can arrest you for just about any reason. And then you go through the arraignment process, you get a bail, and whether or not you're bailed out is luck of the draw. So groups of people have gotten together and they've decided this isn't cool. Especially if you're being politically active. You shouldn't be arrested and charged and to be deprived of your freedom while not convicted of a crime. because you're poor, because you don't have the money to pay a bail. So they have organized nonprofits and pools of money to bail people out. Sometimes it's intended for activists, which is what you'll see in the case of the dossier with the Cop City. Other times it's just like, we're going to bail out nonviolent offenders or people who have a bail under a certain amount, which you see in some of the bail funds in Chicago, for instance, and Cook County, something that the Sheriff's Department in Cook County, which is where Chicago, Illinois is, their jail is in a very bad part of Chicago, like a very dangerous part of Chicago. And they like to release people in the middle of the night with no resources. And so this organization bails people out and then meets them as they come out of the jail so they don't get robbed or killed. So these organizations, they exist throughout the United States. It's really, like, kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, American phenomenon, because most places don't have cash bail. You either are released until you come back, or they just keep you in jail. In other instances where they're trying to like criminalize or make it really difficult to bail people out, like Tennessee, for instance, is trying to pass a law right now that would make it possible for victims of crimes committed by people on bail, make it possible for them to sue the people that bailed them out. This is just to keep people from being bailed out, right? Like, make it difficult for people to be out and about. There's various reasons for that. But in the case of Georgia, the protesters are being arrested. And what they're protesting is a combination of two things, or it's one of these two things. The first one is like an environmental activism against the building of what they call Cop City, which is a training facility for police officers. The land leased for that was supposed to be used for a particular purpose. It wasn't supposed to be something that could be developed. It was supposed to remain undeveloped, kind of natural for people to enjoy, the outdoors. Atlanta has the most green space of any city in the United States, and part of it is because of things like that land being deliberately set aside for use. In this case, it was deliberately set aside for use by Black people because of segregation. So, city leases the land. They want to specifically build this training facility. So people are protesting for environmental reasons. Then there are people that are protesting for police reform, police divestment reasons. So people that are opposed to the type of facility that's being built because of what it implicates. It's training specifically to do certain things as a police officer, like urban arrests, urban combat, things like that. And so two different reasons people are protesting, and sometimes they meet and they are protesting for both reasons. And they are involved in this network of people that bail other people out. So they collect money, they have a fund, and they bail people out. And to some extent, part of that is legitimate. Like, it was incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Georgia. So the state of Georgia, in response to this activism, arrested 61 people and charged them with racketeering. Racketeering is under RICO. It's how we arrest like mafia bosses, right? It's the sort of thing that Tony Soprano was worried about being arrested for. He wasn't really worried about the murder. He was worried about the conspiracy, the attack, the money movement, and the money laundering aspect of criminal activity. So they're accusing people of collecting money in order to make it possible to commit crimes. That's what racketeering is. So that's what they've been charged with. And recently, a judge threw out all 61 indictments. The state of Georgia can re-indict them. They can appeal the decision. But essentially, the idea here was that the activists believed they were targeted for their activism and not because they were committing any crime, and their activism was a form of mutual aid. Pooling your resources in order to bail people out of jail is a form of mutual aid. And it's an example of mutual aid being made illegal or difficult to do by the law, by the state. Other examples are a little less tense. So, for instance, if you give somebody a sandwich, that's usually not a crime, but if you give homeless people a sandwich, that can be a crime in some jurisdictions. In Georgia, if you give somebody a bottle of water or a seat, that's fine unless they're standing in line to vote. So, like, there's examples of mutual aid being illegal. In fact, after Hurricane Helene in North Carolina and Tennessee, people were arrested for running rescue missions. And you can make all sorts of arguments about why they shouldn't be doing that, why it was dangerous for them to do that. But the point is, are government making mutual aid difficult or illegal, punishing people for doing it? And in the case of Cop City, it's particularly insidious because they're accusing people who are legitimately behaving within the system the way it was designed, giving the cash bail. They're punishing people for participating in that system. Imagine if a bondsman was arrested for bailing people out for like the thing that he's making money for. It just doesn't compute, right? So that's what this dossier is about. It's a collection of articles that kind of go historically through the chronological activity of the Cop City protesters, why they're doing what they're doing, what happened to them, and the outcome. And the whole point is to get you to see like how this stuff unfolds and the application of political philosophy.